What was the first thing you did when you got to VMworld in Europe?
I rode a taxi to the hotel.
Okay, I'm looking for something cooler than that.
It needs all the things. Give it all the things.
Oh, perfect. You nailed it.
You can't bend physics, but you can do is write better software.
And you're doing MPLS changes or BGP changes. May God be with you, right?
I always feel like I'm just a little fish in a sea of big fish.
I've got a nested 6-node vSAN.
Aw, guys. People, quite often think that they don't have anything to bring to the table when they absolutely do.
Everybody should. Anybody in IT that skips the phone stuff, it just hasn't earned it.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question.
On demand.
Correct.
Welcome to Gigacast episode 23 for Tuesday, November 13th. Live to tape from the Gigacast headquarters, I'm Britton Johnson.
And broadcasting live from my home lab, I'm Tony Reeves.
Welcome to November, everybody. It's been a month, and holy cow, what a difference a month makes. Tony, it's a boy.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We had a baby boy on Saturday night, October 20th. So
awesome.
He's a cute little guy.
And he just, I think the best part of that story is your wife was in labor all day and didn't tell you.
Yeah. I'm across town. I went to band practice at church and we're coming back and we're like, hey, what's going on? Do you want us to pick up dinner? And she's like, yeah, you and Ryan probably should, because I think we're going to have the baby tonight. I just got off the phone with the doctor. I'm like, what? Yeah. Then, of course, there's the moment when you find that out and everybody on the freeway is doing 10 miles an hour under the speed limit. And you're like, right. Get out of my freaking way.
Yeah. Well, and I told my wife that, and I'm just like, suffice it to say, your wife knows you really, really well, and she did the right thing, because you would have been freaking out the whole time.
Wouldn't have been that bad.
Yeah, you would have. So you had a boy. My daughter had surgery to get another cochlear implant, so we've both had like major medical things happen in the last month, and so it's just been crazy. Mm-hmm. So,
and I've just survived.
And Cody DeArkland's here.
He snuck in the back door again.
What's up, guys?
Cody, how you been?
Doing swell. Home, back in the States, so feeling good about that.
How long were you over in Europe?
Oh, let's see. Left on the 3rd because we got in because I did part of the hands-on lab stuff. So I was there a couple days before most of the other VMware folk. And I was there for, I think, 8 days, 7 days, something like that.
That's dedication, folks.
That's a trip.
Something like that. It's a whole lot of something.
Yeah.
So it's good to be home, though. Good to be back with the family. Good to be back at home. I always tell people that it sounds super corny, but I'm fortunate to have a life that I am excited to come back to. I know a lot of people in the business who they look at these like trips away from family as like a break, but it's hard when I leave. So it's good when I come home. It's good to have that kind of a life.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference, especially when you're doing long trips like that. I mean,
yeah, 19 hours one way, 21 back, and then I got late or had like a delay, so it was almost like a full day of flight travel after the delay and everything. So
that's rough.
That's never fun.
Yeah.
But your mileage status probably got a huge boost for that.
Was because I came out of the tech marketing team late in the year. Like I wasn't traveling a lot as an SE, so I have no status really. But John Schulman, I don't know if you guys saw, I posted on Twitter. John Schulman actually threw down. He had an upgrade certificate for United, and he threw it down on my domestic flight home. So like the New York to Sacramento flight, and it came through. So it was my first time ever flying in first class. So that was pretty cool.
Nice.
The
closest thing I've ever done to that is my wife and I took a vacation to Seattle, and we flew business class from Minneapolis to Seattle for like an extra $100 each. And we're just like, oh, this is so worth it.
So it's actually kind of funny because while first class was nice and no complaints, it would happen that the first class flight that I was able to get upgraded on, there was like 10 rows of Economy Plus wide open that were like full on open rows. So like Is first class better than three open seats of
So you
of
could have just
economy
laid
plus?
down on the open seats.
I know that's kind of my point, right? Like, I don't know which one's better, because like the first class seats are really nice, but they're also kind of shorter in my opinion, or they felt shorter to me, which as a tall guy, it's tough. So
that's
either way,
everything for you.
first world problems. Like,
Tall guy problems. Yeah.
props to John for throwing down the upgrade cert. That was really cool of him. So
All right. So before we get into more of what happened in Europe, do we have any other news updates, Tony?
We just got through Blogtober, which I was an epic fail because of all the baby stuff.
I think you'll get a
But
pass.
it looks like you nailed it. Did you hit all 5?
No, I only did the 3, but I didn't get any credit for it because they weren't tech. So
Yeah,
I never officially
that's
signed
semantics.
it. No,
semantics.
if you look at what Matt Heldstad puts out on Twitter, he specifically tags them Blogtober Tech, #Blogtober Tech.
So you should have hashtagged them Blogtober Tech. Just credit for it.
I never actually signed up with Matt either, so
that's the other technicality.
Yeah, so I'm fine just being whatever, because I was a last minute kind of just. I did each of them probably within like half an hour, because it was an idea rolling around in my head, because I've been like a part-time stay-at-home parent for the last 2, 3, 4 years, alongside working full-time, and I watch a lot of kids TV shows, and so as I'm watching these kids TV shows with my kids, I'm like, whatever that guy just said, that was an amazing leadership quote.
Yeah, you actually were banging those posts out pretty quick.
So like, as I'm watching this stuff, I'm like, man, this stuff is gold, Jerry. And so it just,
Seinfeld.
yeah, and it was just like, I mean, especially like the first one that hit me was this Care Bears Netflix show, and like the very first episode, in the first like 120, the first like minute of the series, this character comes out and he lays out a leadership 101 lesson that is just like everything he does in the first 2 minutes or 1 minute of the show is everything every leader in a leadership position should do with their team. And
Nice.
and I saw that, I'm just like, this is so simple. How come people don't do this? So go to gigabit.com/blog and just look at those last couple of entries, and they're the only 3 that are out there really. But
because you're not a blogger.
I'm not a blogger, I'm a podcaster, and I'm not sorry.
Fair enough.
Because, I got all kinds of grief from Ariel Sanchez because he's just like, oh, you don't tell me you don't have time. And I'm like, you're right, Ariel, I don't have time. Or I do have time, I just don't want to make time to do it. I want to spend time with my family.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing is, I'm a believer in doing stuff that inspires you, right? And there's a lot of things you can make time for, but you shouldn't force yourself into something if it's not inspiring you. Like,
Right.
I blog because some of the biggest people I look up to blog, and I want to have that kind of impact, and that inspires me. But you also do the podcast thing, and I don't know if I really have the discipline to stay consistent on doing a podcast, right? So it's all. I'm a fan of people doing things that inspire them, whether it's a blog, whether it's a podcast, whether it's drawing in the clouds with butterflies.
Well, and I would
Whatever
love
makes
to do
you happy.
this more often, but the time just isn't in the cards,
Totally.
But yeah. Other news, Tony.
I am now a Wisconsin VMUG leader instead of a steering committee member. So I
Congratulations! I still don't have a sound effect for that.
Yeah, I got a promotion and I'll be helping out more in that capacity, and looking forward to hopefully making it to the VMUG Leader Summit in Palo Alto in February.
Yeah, I saw that.
So
I want to see if I
what
can
are your-
pull off something fun for that.
What are your chances of actually getting to that, Tony, do you think?
well, I cleared it with my Wisconsin co-leaders,
Okay.
and I had to apply. I didn't, never having done this before, didn't realize there was an application process, but there is. And so I guess we'll see what happens after that. They do send one from one maximum per VMUG, but they don't send from every VMUG. So this being my first year, I guess we'll just kind of see what happens.
I think it's a lot of them though, right? Like I think it's a lot of VMUGs because I worked the summit last year.
Okay.
And there was a lot of people. So
you going to be there next year?
Well, I mean, it's not a big deal for me to head down, even if I'm not formally there. I'll just drive down and visit with everyone. Either way, like
Bello?
2 hours.
Okay.
It's an easy drive. I'll head down in the morning and just have BU meetings, and they do a good show. Like there was a lot of stuff that the VMUG people got that year. Like as far as not like swag stuff, they got some cool swag, but presentations, and I think Pat came in and spoke. Like there was a lot of really cool stuff about the Leader Summit that year or last year.
Yeah, it looked really interesting, and being active in the community, I have a bunch of friends that had encouraged me to try to make it this next year, and so I'm glad it's hopefully going to work out. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything internally around what the agenda looks like yet. I don't know if they've really firmed that up, but I know who to message. So
cool.
To ping around and see if I can force my way into some VMUG Leader Summit convos.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe, well played.
Yeah.
Oh, I know this is not tech related, but Stan Lee yesterday.
Oh, so I know.
Man, that's
I saw
that's
that
painful.
and I was just like, I don't know. I mean,
He's 95.
I didn't even know he was that old, first of all.
Yeah.
And
it's gonna hit people hard next.
Avengers.
Next
film.
Avengers movie. Yeah.
It's like I wonder if he already got his cameo done or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
If they do and they put it in, then it'll hit people even harder, I would think. But yeah, that was some shocking news yesterday.
And I mean, like, my response on Twitter was my instant thought when I saw this, and I tweeted it out because it's like, this is an instant thought that I should just put on Twitter because. But there's a case for a guy who, from all the outside perspectives, he loved what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like a perfect case scenario for do the work you love, and you're going to be just beyond happy with what you do in your life, and how doing work that you love can impact the world for good. Because I mean, that guy has changed so many people's lives. He's created careers for people,
an entire movie studio around his projects, and
good on Marvel for bringing him back into the fold after kicking him out years and years ago.
There's we won't get into it too far on this, but there's like, if you ever have a chance, go back and read like the story of Marvel Studios and how Marvel Studios came to be. And it's a crazy, crazy story. Like how, not necessarily specific to Stan Lee, but like the fact that they pretty much bet the entire existence of Marvel on that first Iron Man movie being successful. And if they had lost, like if the movie hadn't done well, it was not going to be a good thing for Marvel. So like, it's a really cool story to go and read up on.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I guess when I saw the news that I guess it was just a couple of months ago that Marvel celebrated their 10th anniversary, wasn't it?
I think earlier this year, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember seeing that, and I'm like, what? They're only 10 years old? For some reason, I thought they'd been around longer. I didn't realize that the first Iron Man was their first movie.
Well, because there had been other movies based on Marvel Comics, but they just were done so horribly that people just ignored them in large part.
Yeah.
But,
so rip Stan Lee.
Yeah, and everybody, like critically, they hate Marvel films because they're all the same, but, it's fun to watch.
I don't know, man. They score pretty well on Rotten Tomatoes. So I'm a fan. Come at me.
Have at you.
All right.
Back to tech.
Back to technology.
That was a little segue.
Segue done. Moving on. So, Cody, what was the first thing you did when you got to VMworld in Europe?
I rode a taxi to the hotel.
Okay, I'm looking for something cooler than that.
Okay, so As far as getting to VMworld or getting to like
That is my
Europe?
question. That was my question. Yes.
Okay. So, because I was on the hands-on lab team, we get in a couple of days early and we go in and we run through testing on the labs. So I was working on. I had my own lab that was not my own lab. I had a lab that I kind of watched over, which was
The Cody lab.
Right. Is advanced extensibility. So it's the module for VRA that covers like Infoblox and Puppet, and some basic VRO stuff. But I also helped, and I use help lightly. I worked with Grand Orchard and a guy named Chris Slater on the Cloud Automation Services Lab. So they had done a ton of the work. Grant more so, but I had helped with some of the automation around how the lab instantiates with Python. And then I helped them do some of the rewrites on the manuals. But we worked on that, testing it, making sure it was ready for users, making sure that there was no problems. So we did that from probably about, so I got there on Friday. That started on Sunday. So from Sunday until at like 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. we were working on that.
So I guess this is the main question that hits my mind when I hear about VMworld in Europe is how is it different from the US version? Is it smaller?
It's definitely smaller. I'd say it's probably about 20-30% the size of VMworld US. So it's considerably smaller. I mean, the hands-on lab area is very very tiny compared to what you'd see in US. Everything's a lot more like centrally located from like the show floor area. The sessions, like breakout sessions, are pretty far away. So that's a little bit inconvenient. It's a much more like slower pace conference. Like VMworld Vegas, you're just going 24/7, wall to wall, right?
Yep.
Barcelona is definitely a slower pace. I think it's just a culture thing.
Yeah, that's just Spain in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more chill. But like it was interesting to be out like on the solutions exchange floor and have it be everything's very like tight together in that area. So it's a very interesting experience. It's very cool, but it's very interesting.
Now, is everything primarily still done in English?
Yeah. So they have a couple of like hands-on labs that have if there's other language people. Like people who speak other languages, they'll host those. But generally everything is in English. Which is interesting because one of my feedback items on like mine and Kyle's session, I haven't talked to him about this yet. So if he listens to this, he'll hear this. One of the feedback things we got was Cody needs to remember that in VMware Barcelona, not everyone is English speaking, which is true, but I'm not entirely sure what I would have done different. Like, because no one had non-English sessions.
More slowly.
Maybe that's the feedback, but that wasn't what was said. So it was a little confusing. Yeah. So same sessions though, like mine and Kyle's session was the same. I had a cloud automation services session that was a new ad, so that one obviously didn't have like a baseline to compare with, but yeah.
Yeah, because I think they pretty clearly notated on the VMworld registration page, that it's going to be sessions in English.
Yeah, it was a weird one, but maybe it was a talk slower kind of feedback thing. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're a passionate guy, so I can see when you get really going on a topic that you're, excited about. That you just really get going, and
totally. So maybe that's it. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they'll hear this and drop me a line on Twitter and explain.
If we have listeners in Spain or in EMEA, then I tip my hat to all of them. If I was wearing a hat. Okay. I guess like when it comes to stuff in Europe, sorry.
Any other big announcements?
The Heptio thing was a big one. So, obviously welcome back all of the people who had left. So Scott Lowe's back. Yeah. So that's great. So Heptio was a big announcement. I think they announced the renaming of VKE to VMware Cloud PKS or PKS Cloud, something like that. I'm trying to remember if there's any other major announcements. CMBU didn't have any big announcements. We announced there was the announcement of like the new vSphere Platinum licensing, which has like App Defense in it. Mm-hmm. And so we had vSphere or vRealize Suite Platinum or whatever that includes it. So there's that, but not product announcement so much.
And there was a lot of chatter about the ESXi on a Raspberry Pi, which
that that's a good one.
Like why aren't which to me it seems like they should be calling it ESX Pi, but that's just me. But at the same time, like I didn't watch that whole announcement, but I saw the little exchange between Pat and now I just forgot his name.
Ray O'Farrell.
Ray.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's cool. But then I'm just like, what could you even use this for? And I know there's a whole bunch of like blogs and people out there that are figuring out use cases for this thing, but I'm just like, I don't know. I don't own a Raspberry Pi, so I've never really played with one to know how much or what you can do with it. All I know is it's a really, really low power PC.
I think it's a pretty exciting use case to me. Especially when you think about like the implications for Edge. I mean, when I worked at the utility company, we had sites that we'd throw a small host out at that were really only running like 1 to 2 machines, and they were like really just there for sensor data and stuff. So like it's definitely there's a huge use case for it. I think it's really exciting, and of course I'm excited for when it becomes a fully available thing to see people with their 12 node Raspberry Pi vSphere clusters. It'll be here I am trying to add it to VRA or add it to CAS. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think they said in the announcement that they were able to shrink it down to use 512 meg of RAM, so you'd still have 512 free. So I mean, if you start talking containers, you can actually run a fair amount of containers in that.
Absolutely.
You're not going to run any Windows VMs, but there's a lot of IoT implications and things that people are thinking about doing with that stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Another point that I had heard brought up as well is that platform for ARM, people want to see it run on a Pi, but there's a lot of more powerful machines that will run that platform as well that have more CPU availability and more RAM as well. So
yeah, we have to remember that like the Raspberry Pi thing is cool, but it's also the most recognizable thing. So it makes sense for that to be shown. But we have to remember that there are ARM systems that are much, much larger than that, right?
Yep.
Well, there's a lot of like Synology devices that are running on ARM. So
yeah.
That to me seems like that'd be an interesting use case because you can actually add RAM to some of those and tons of local storage. So
yeah, like my Synology has I think I bumped it up to like 16 gigs or some noise like that. So imagine putting like a witness host on a Synology box, right? That talks with my like two node vSAN. Because right now I run my witness VM on like my management host as a separate one, right? Like I could potentially move that footprint into my Synology as an example.
Yeah, and I think Duncan Epping was also talking about that being a potential, deployment case for a witness appliance on Raspberry Pi as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'm in the middle of that's something I forgot to announce. I'm in the middle of finally building out my 2-node vSAN, Cody.
Oh, I love me some 2-node vSAN.
Yeah, I actually, from somebody who wants to remain anonymous, but you know who you are, and you're probably listening at some point in the future, they donated the 10K drives that I needed, and they donated 3 of the 4 SSDs I need to run 2 nodes in each server. So
very nice.
Yeah, I have to flash the controllers to IT mode and get my networking set up, and I'll be good to go.
Very nice.
So for the vSAN uninitiated, which would be me, what is that exactly? Talk me through a basic overall design of what that 2-node setup looks like.
So basically, you're mirroring the contents across both hosts.
Okay.
And then you have this witness appliance, which gets deployed into a separate physical infrastructure. It can be either separate local, or it can be across, for example, a WAN link or something else. And essentially, it allows you to have that witness component, which is on a 3 or 4 or 5 or a normal vSAN cluster, is normally inside of the cluster. You can have it outside the cluster, and it allows you to get that. The word is escaping me. The quorum that you need.
Oh yes.
To determine if, in the event of a failure, what data wins. And in that scenario, you have the availability. You have the ability to save the money. You can do 2-node direct connect, and you don't even need a switch.
Right. Okay, there it is. Yep. So the witness itself, its primary purpose is what? Just to make decisions between who's primary and who's failover, or something else?
Yeah, it provides the quorum to determine which side of the data wins if you have a failure. The other thing is the witness appliance is actually just another build of ESXi. It's custom built, and it's not allowed to run any virtual machines. So when you deploy it, you're deploying that custom VM, and it's for those that are familiar with nested virtualization. It's essentially a nested VM. You can run a bare metal, but yeah. So I'm losing my train of thought there.
It's okay.
It's a purpose-built virtual appliance, right? So like it's purpose-built to be a witness host. So like you can obviously do that on a physical, but like if you have a device that's a purpose-built, why not use it?
Mm-hmm.
So Cody, you did, switching gears, this would be an amazing transition. You did another V Brown bag recently.
Oh.
And I listened to a good majority of it live, and then I had to put the kids to bed, and then I jumped off for a little bit, and then I came back on just in time for you to unplug your headset. That was epic, by the way.
I'm trying to remember what I did this V Brown bag on. No, this was a CAS one. This was a cloud automation service V Brown bag. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really good. You kind of like stepped through, step one, and covered a lot of introduction type stuff of what CAS does and all that. And so if you're really wondering what Cody does on a day-to-day basis, go out to YouTube and find the V Brown Bag channel and pull up his last one, the most recent one, and you will be amazed.
So I'll drop some knowledge on you guys, and anybody who's listening to this will get to. I'm not talking about this on Twitter. My hope is that nobody who listens to this will talk about it on Twitter. I can't stop you, but let's play the honor system, people.
Yay, we get exclusive.
No, this is like, I would put this as like a quasi big exclusive.
Whoa.
So we are going to do a very unique V Brown bag in December, where we are going to get the hands-on lab to pre-populate 50 lab environments. And we are going to take people from the community. I'm going to drop it in the vExpert chat, vExpert cloud chat, set up some signups. We're going to take 50 people through some custom lab exercises on CAS. So we're going to do this on V Brown bag, targeting the 19th of December, I think. So basically I'll put out a thing, people sign up, you'll get we'll add you, you'll have access to the cloud automation services environment. You'll be able to go into the hands-on lab, load it up. We will take you through, kind of step by step how to do some cool stuff. It's going to be me and Grant Orchard leading it. So okay. Grant's one of my best friends on the planet. He's a phenomenal dude, really, really smart with CAS. We've been in it. He was in it a little bit longer than me, but we've been in it since the beginning together. So we're going to lead it. But then John Schulman, he's in the community. John Schulman used to be he was a specialist for cloud management, but now he's in product management. So he's going to be there doing kind of being a voice of product management there to help answer questions, talk about some direction, some strategy stuff, but also there to help us out if we get stuck. But it's going to be a really, really, really fun kind of session, because usually V Brown bags, they're a blast. I love doing them, but they're very much me presenting to you.
Right.
But now we're going to turn this around and have you able to actually participate, and we'll have like a Slack channel set up. People can come in there and talk through stuff. You see the environment. It's going to be a fully functional CAS environment. It's going to have NSXT in it. It's going to have ESX hosts, obviously. It'll be set up to do provisioning to Azure or AWS, and we're going to take you through building blueprints and setting it up. So it's going to be really fun. We're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Chris Williams is going to come and host it for us. So Chris is
Nice.
a dear friend, great guy.
Yeah, we love Chris.
Yeah.
Friend of the show. What do you say? And he's gonna come back probably sometime next year, because he wants to talk more about AWS cloud formation templates.
Yeah, cool. Chris is doing some really cool stuff these days in AWS. Super happy for him. But that's also why, with the multi-cloud stuff, he was also the first person to ever host my V Brown bag. So when we were talking, I definitely wanted him to host this. So
yeah, he's a great guy. Chris, if you're listening,
so hopefully you guys will be able to schedule some time and be a part of that too. It'd be fun to have you guys come out and play with it.
Well, depending upon when it is. Yeah, the 20th is my birthday, so
it's 19th. Scrub, suck it up.
See, we have a V mug the 18th.
I know.
So all this stuff, all I'm hearing is that the 19th is an optimal day because neither of you have anything going on the 19th. That's what I'm hearing here.
Well, if we get the exclusive, I guess we should get an invite.
Yeah. Well, send me. You'll have to do. Well, we'll watch the tweeters for it, and if I see it, I'll try to sign up. Okay. I'm not going to promise you anything. We already had the family time discussion.
You better have a good excuse for why you don't, or I am going to go.
You're gonna go. You're gonna go to virtually speaking from now on.
Our contract is over.
Right. No, so it's gonna be a real fun thing, and a good way to give the community a chance to play with something that it's not always as easy to get to. And we're not going to necessarily throw people into the hands-on lab. It's going to be there, but we're going to use that hands-on lab environment to do custom exercises.
Yeah, I mean, I will do my best to sign up. I cross my heart and hope that I can make it, because it's one of these things. Like every time I talk to somebody from VMware or wherever, I always say, and this is my broken record moment of the show, I want to learn this stuff. I want to know it all, but I just can't. Yeah.
I haven't learned that lesson yet. I can learn everything. until I have a brain seizure.
Till your wife comes into your office and just finds you on the floor and blood everywhere one day. Yeah.
But I'm gonna be the smartest guy bleeding on the floor.
That's a quote that needs to get worked into the intro.
Yeah.
That's one of those moments where I'm really happy. I'm really proud of that because it came off immediately. Didn't even have to think about it. It was just there. Good time.
Did you slower paid podcast tonight?
Yeah. Did you do the hackathon in VMworld Europe too, or not?
No, not this time. The truth is, with how busy Vegas was, I really wanted this VMworld to be a little bit more on the chill side. So I skipped out on that this year. Spent time with people from Europe that I don't always get to see. Took it pretty easy.
Okay. What was your VMworld hackathon project? I forget.
There's two sides to this. My project was to teach people Python.
Right.
the project for the team was kind of a Slackbot kind of thing that was interacting with VMC. So Brian Graff hooked us up with a single node VMC instance that we were using and doing like AWS Lambda calls via Python. But I was pretty clear with the team out of the gate, like, look, if you guys all walk away knowing a little bit of Python, then my goal's met. Like, I don't care if we win, I don't care if we lose. I just want to teach you guys something.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Tony, do you have anything? I'm already out of my list of stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a low key episode this time around.
But you guys got broke off with some exclusivity.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
I don't really think I have anything else for him. I mean, as far as something
we can't
else,
end now. We've got like a whole hour left.
I know. So I don't know. Cody, do you mess with containers at all?
I do.
Running them in Docker, or what are you doing?
Yeah. So I actually just worked on a project internally. I'm trying to build some better demo content internally for some of our automation platforms. And one of the things I built was a little 3-tier application in Docker. It started off as just a Docker app, and then grew into a Kubernetes app. So learned a lot about building it with like Docker Compose, and then grew up into doing it in Kubernetes. I've been around the gamut.
So is Docker Compose like a light version or an easy beginner version of Kubernetes then?
I wouldn't say that. So what Docker Compose
there?
allows you to do is instantiate an application, usually an application stack using Docker. So for example, you might not be a Kubernetes expert, but you're familiar with the concept that when you deploy an application in Kubernetes, usually you're deploying a YAML file, and it reads that YAML and deploys the tiers of an application, right?
I am now.
Okay, there you go.
I'm learning.
Docker Compose is very similar. The best way to think about it is think about the manual process, right? If you had 3 Docker containers that you had built to interact with one another, right? You built a 3-tier app. Maybe the front end is an Angular application. The mid-tier is like an API layer that's probably like an Nginx web server with maybe Python Flask inside of it that's doing API calls. And then your back end is database. And all those are wired up to talk to each other. If you were doing it manually, you would deploy a Docker network. You would then you'd build each one of the containers and then deploy those containers onto that network and hope that you had wired everything up together.
Mm-hmm.
With Docker Compose, you can actually link all of them together, right? So you can have this file that deploys this multi-tier application. It's a shame that this is not a video cast, because I have an example of that makes a lot of sense. So I'll send it to you offline, and you can take a look at what a Docker Compose file looks like.
You can share your screen and you can put it on the video on YouTube.
Yeah,
that's true. We could do that. I just have to make sure there's nothing terribly tragic in here. Okay, where is...
The reason I'm asking all of this is just the other day, last week, I spun up my very first Docker container, and trying to learn a little bit more about it. I spun up Portainer, so I had a visual GUI to kind of confirm what's in there, and then I've been working on Plex, and just trying to. Britton had mentioned, actually, that's probably something else we should talk about. Britton is. I'm also working on getting my Ubiquity Unify controller set up as a Docker container. And
so I'm running my USG as a Docker container as well.
You are?
Or my USG, not my USG, my
Unify controller.
Sorry. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just starting to learn about this. I've learned a lot about the commands, the permissions, building my NFS shares out to my FreeNAS server for storage, and just there's a lot to it that I never thought of before. So
yeah, totally. So this is a Docker Compose file on that note. There's 3 containers, right? So I have a front end container, I have an API container, I have a database backend. It basically gives instructions on what it needs to do and what order it needs to do. So it exposes port 80 on the front end. All of this stuff lives on this CMBU network, Cloud Management Business Unit. And those containers can talk freely between one another, but we've exposed port 80 out. So this is essentially like a recipe for deploying a multi-tier Docker instance. Now this will deploy them all onto a single host. So when I go Docker compose up, it'll read this file and do all of that. But I can also do like Docker compose build, Docker compose push. So build will build the containers, push will push them into my repository. So I have a Harbor repo up. That is Harbor is VMware's open source Docker registry. So same thing as Docker Hub, but more tuned for like an on-premises hosting.
Okay.
So this will actually go out and deploy my cool little application on a single Docker host. So you could pull this down. You could clone this repo that I have, the CMBU Bootcamp repo. Mm-hmm. You could do a Docker compose up against this, and it would deploy successfully on a Docker host in your environment. So them is be a recipe. But then like conversely, if we go back in the repo and we look at the Kubernetes deployment, this is what it looks like from a Kubernetes standpoint, right? So we have our application tiers, we're tagging them out, we're creating communication between those, we're saying how many replicas we want of each tier, so on and so forth. So you see the Kubernetes file is much more complex, but it's also deploying a load balancer. It's doing a lot more stuff than the Docker Compose. So most people like develop inside of Docker, move up to deploying their stack in Compose, and when everything's deploying fine in Compose, they will move up and deploy out of Kubernetes.
Okay. So just a kind of a different way of doing things. Sounds like Kubernetes is more large enterprise kind of automation.
When you care about failure and how to have like an operational platform, right? Because like Kubernetes will also, you can set up health checks so that if a pod goes unhealthy, it automatically tears it down and redeploys it. There's a lot of stuff that Kubernetes adds from like a resiliency standpoint. Docker natively has something called Swarm that used to be the competition used to be Swarm versus Kubernetes. Kubernetes kind of won that battle. Swarm is still a thing. Swarm is a very easy way to do like clustered Docker stuff. And have like 3 Docker hosts that communicate with each other, and you're able to deploy replicas similar to in Kubernetes.
Is there any, for somebody like me who's, beginner learning this stuff from the ground up, is there any good recommendations for videos like Pluralsight or anybody out there that you know of that has some good learning videos? Oh
man, there's a ton of content out there. You can kind of throw a stone and land some good place. If you want to learn Kubernetes, there's a book called Kubernetes Up and Running. Kelsey Hightower, Joe Beta wrote it. Joe Beta, who works for Heptio, who VMware just bought. So I found that book to be amazing. That was a great read. There's a ton of content out there. I'm totally blanking out on anything that's great right now. As a VMware guy, I always recommend looking at like vSphere integrated containers. They're a great place to start. Likely already licensed for it, so might as well check it out. And Vic is just a fun platform and really has some cool uses.
And I kind of wasn't sure where to start with this whole container thing because they've always kind of fascinated me. And like Britton's always said, it's just hard to find the time to delve into all of these different technology disciplines. But I couldn't make my decision up whether I wanted to go Docker or whether I wanted to go the other route. And I was just like,
Kubernetes. So it's not one or the other. You have to know Docker to move up to the Kubernetes stack. So
no, sorry, Docker versus Vic. And so I wasn't sure which route I was going to go. I actually ended up getting a Vic deployment. I think it was 1.0 or 1.1, and then they revised it shortly after I deployed the OVA. And I hadn't finalized the installation, but they said that I think 1.2 made the installation a lot easier. So I'm like, well, I should probably do that. And then I never got around to it. And so now I've just done Docker.
So Vic is still Docker. It's just a method. It turns your ESX host into a Docker host. Like there's a lot more tech to it than just that. But a good way to think about it is like with Docker, you're deploying like a Ubuntu VM or a CentOS VM, and you're installing Docker on it. Then that's your Docker host. Yep. With Vic, your vSphere host is your Docker host. And there's some really cool stuff like you being able to use vSAN for persistent storage. Like Cormac Hogan did a ton of really good articles around how to use vSAN as like a persistent data store for for Docker hosts. Like why that's relevant is, say you deploy like a Postgres container, you would want your data to be in a persistent volume. You can actually like kill that Docker container, reinstantiate a new one, and it'll use that existing mount. So like all your data is still there, all of your schema is still there. Like it really drives the point home of the resiliency of containers. Yeah, something I say all the time about containers is that every time I spend an hour playing in the world of Docker or in Kubernetes, I learn something that just blows my mind every time. There's so much there, and it's such a very forward-thinking platform. It's anyone who's not investing time in learning containers on some level right now is shooting themselves in the foot, yourselves included.
That's one thing that kind of that's one thing that kind of blew me away, is the fact that I'm so used to, if you blow something away, you lose it. You lose your configuration, you lose the application. But this idea that you have these mount points to other shared storage where you can completely keep everything and just blow it away, that's mind blowing. It's pretty cool. So
there's a vBrown bag I did that'll really mess you up.
Okay.
So VMware has a product called Dispatch. It's a function as a service platform. A function as a service is like Lambda. And a lot of people who are new to containers don't realize that everything that happens in Lambda is a container. Right? So when you run a function, it spins up a container. So all those different languages Lambda has available are essentially just containers that they have, like images. We use containers heavily inside a code stream within CAS to do CI tasks. That being said, I ran a vBrown bag where I took OpenFAS, which is a function as a service platform, Dispatch integrated with it very heavily, and I ran these functions. And these functions that I did were simple vSphere calls, right? So you would hit a URL and it would return back all the VMs in my environment. So it ran this Python function on the back end. What was really trippy about it is that it ran in Kubernetes and it was automatically scalable. So I exposed my lab to the internet on this vBrown bag, and I threw it up on Twitter, and I said, "Hey guys, attack this." And you could watch it go. I watched it go from one replica, and auto scale out to 55 replicas of this function as a service platform based on the scale that was hitting my environment. Never crippled, ran the whole time all the way through, no issues. And then when I killed it from the edge and turned off the NAT, I watched it scale all the way back down to one little node. So like this idea of this auto scaling environment, that's what blew my mind, is like this idea of if you architect your application right, your web front end should never care about how many exist. It's just sitting behind a load balancer, right? So like this idea that it can scale up to 50 and no admin ever touches that, or it'll scale back down to 1 and no admin ever has to be involved in those actions. That's, as a guy who used to ask for 2 more web servers to throw behind a load balancer, to have that not be an issue anymore was just, that's the cool stuff.
Is that the one called VMware APIs as a service using OpenFAS and VIO Kubernetes?
Yeah, that's it.
Looks like you did that October 17th of last year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Found it as well.
So go watch that one, folks. So here's where I get really confused with all of this stuff, Cody. I mean, I hear people talk about, containers, and I hear Docker, and I hear all this other stuff like Puppet and Chef, and I don't even know what any of this stuff is half the time. I don't know if they're all in the same boat, or if they're different versions of things, or like what's what. There's so you have vSphere integrated containers, or VIC. You have Docker. You have everything else that is in Kubernetes. I mean, I'm so confused just by the sheer amount of options. So what's really the place to start with this stuff? That's where I get confused and I just stop.
Yeah. So start, as far as containers go, starting with VIC, starting with basic Docker is a great place to be, right? Start with a simple web page and throw it in container and build from there. Now it takes lab time, right? And you have to play around and have time to do that.
Right.
The Chef Puppet Ansible conversation is a separate thing. Those guys are what we call configuration management.
Okay.
So think about how to mass configure existing environments.
Okay.
It's a much tougher like sell to have, in my opinion, to have like something like Puppet manage a Docker environment, right? There's use cases for it, of course, but Docker is supposed to be stateless. You're not supposed to be changing these containers. If you need to change them, you're supposed to blow them away and load a new version. I mean, that's why Kubernetes has the ability to recycle pods, right? So if I make a change, I can apply my new YAML and Kubernetes will orchestrate taking down the old versions and bringing up the new versions, so there's no outage. So the Puppet, Chef, Ansible use case, that's kind of a separate world. I'm actually working on a blog right now around getting started with Puppet open source in a home lab. And that's because I think that Ansible gets a lot of play and there's some really cool stuff about Ansible, but I personally prefer Puppet. And I prefer the Puppet way of doing things. And really what these products are doing is just mass configuration of environments using either Ansible or Puppet, right? So
well, see,
in my case,
you've answered the question already there, because I didn't even know that that's what they did. So
look at this. I don't even represent these products as my VMware job, and I'm giving out value.
Right. Because like I mean, you walk down that aisle at VMworld, and they're kind of all right next to each other, and it's just like as a guy who has never really cracked the book on what those things are, like it all sounds the same kind of Greek, confusing nonsense to me.
As far as like. So if you're a new IT person and you're looking to kind of accelerate your career, right? Investing in Docker is a great place to be. Investing in like getting knowledge around containers and building container platforms, building applications inside of containers, learning how they work, absolutely a great place to be. Puppet, Chef, Ansible, they're not going anywhere. They're great platforms. They all have long lives ahead of them. But they are very much focused on traditional infrastructure. Which isn't going anywhere either, right? Like anybody who says Docker all the things there's a few people who can make that claim and have like the technical skill behind it, but generally I think we all agree that like not everything is built for containers. Not everything needs to be a container. Go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
One other thing that I kind of messed around with, I tried to get Photon running, and I like the fact that Photon has Docker all pretty much ready to go once you deploy it and everything, and that's pretty cool. But so far my experience with Photon has been that it is not for beginners. It is not for beginners with Linux, because there's been a lot of things. I mean, it's trimmed back to be lightweight, so there's a lot of little utilities like NFS utils I had to install manually, and some other things that I had
TNDF,
to learn.
no yum, no apt.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that just as a novice, I would not recommend starting with Photon. I ended up switching back to Ubuntu instead to get Docker up and running.
Yeah, that's good feedback, because it's probably a really good blog post to do. I've historically been a very big Ubuntu guy, I'm a fan. So I recently just switched some of my Docker stuff internally to use Photon again. And I hear where you're coming from. Like there's if you're going to use Photon as a Linux OS, there's a lot of work to do. If you're just using it purely as Docker, it's a little bit easier to get started with, but still there's some things you have to do. Like if you want to be able to access the host remotely, not using SSH, if you just want to do remote Docker commands, you have to go in and edit the docker.service file to add the external API stuff to it. And that's not a Photon problem, that's a Docker problem, a Docker change rather. But there's probably a really good blog post to do around, hey, reintroducing Photon, right? How to get started with Photon and use cases in your lab. If you're using it as a Linux host, there's a ton of stuff you have to install, and it's not the normal like brand of Linux. Ubuntu is much easier
custom,
to get.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it's parsed down, right? The idea of Photon was to be a very much stripped down version of Linux. That's focused on appliances or containers. So that's why like a lot of our appliances are moving towards Photon, because it less security risk footprint.
Yeah, and I think it's a great product. It's just, as a novice, I was kind of lost. It's like, man, this should be working, and I don't know why it's not working. And yeah.
Noted. We will come back to this when I drop a blog post on getting started with Photon again.
That sounds awesome. I will look forward to that post because there's, I'm sure, a lot I can learn from that. It's been a really good experience, but because I've been learning so much. I mean, even some of the more basic commands that I didn't know as a longtime Windows user, right? You don't ever have to worry about any of that stuff inside the Windows world. So it's been interesting from that perspective, but just what a container is and the disposable nature, it's been really interesting to wrap my head around all the changes in that way.
So I'll show you guys another, since we're already in the sharing screens mode, I'll show you guys something else cool too. Sure. So I built this again, I'm not going to turn this into pitching my products, but obviously I represent cloud management business unit. So Cloud Assembly, Service Broker, and CodeStream are my products. So you should see my cloud automation services now, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to pop into CodeStream and just show you something very quick container related. So I moved my blog publishing into CodeStream. So now when I publish my blog posts, it runs a webhook inside of CodeStream, or a webhook fires in GitHub that CodeStream sees and processes a job. And this job is very simple. It does a very, very simple task of it's really just a little script block. And you can see that it goes through and it exports out a bunch of values. It curls down the installation file for Hugo, installs AWS CLI, does some things and stuff. This is running in a container. So in CodeStream, when I go over to CI Workspace, you can see it's pulling down this builder image. This builder image is this Docker file. So when you go to build a container, you have to specify the things that are included in it. So from Ubuntu's base container, I want to update the build, and then I want to install a bunch of stuff. I install wget curl. I update the Git package. I install Python 3.6. I install pip, which is Python's package manager. I install regular pip for Python. I install pigments so I can do this is for syntax highlighting in Hugo. And then I also install AWS CLI via this. So this deploys out, like if I run this Docker file, if I do a Docker build against this file, this will build a container image that I can then consume elsewhere. So learning how to build Docker images is a fun adventure and very useful.
Yeah, I figured there's so many things that are containerized nowadays. I better start learning it. So I'm just kind of
absolutely.
It's very interesting, but still very much above my head. I got to keep delving into it.
Well, and I've forever, like every time I log into the web GUI in my Synology, I see the thing available for running Docker on the Synology.
Yeah, I can't show the containers that I'm running in my Synology.
Yeah, it's okay.
I know why.
for reasons and stuff. You especially know why, Tony.
Yeah,
You. So moving on, using the doc. If you have a Synology and you're not using Docker in it, you're making a mistake.
Just tell me more of what I'm doing wrong, Cody.
That's what I'm here for. My father did the same thing, and it only took like 5 years of therapy to get past it. So.
Tell me
now
more of how I've disappointed you, Cody.
That worked into the intro.
Yes, we'll turn this into a daddy issues therapy session for all of us.
Right. It's like the How I Met Your Mother episodes. The one with the daddy issues.
Here's a tissue.
Right.
Like I still have to like get to work on NSXT in earnest. Like that's what I need to do over the winter because
I got T up and running in my lab. Anthony Burke.
I've barely scratched the surface of it, and I know I have to hit more time in it, and it's hard, man.
It's interesting because like I looked at T back in like the 1.x days or like 1.0 days, and it just melted my brain, and I gave up and just stuck with V. And then a little while back, I had this itch to go and deploy PKS in my lab, which I never finished up because I got access to
which is
PKE
the pivotal container service, right? Yeah. So another thing of
Correct.
containers that we didn't talk. We didn't even talk about Pivotal.
Well, but it's Kubernetes, but really Pivotal Container Services is the combination of NSXT, Bosch from Pivotal, and Kubernetes. So just a combination of three of those.
Okay.
But once I spent some time in digging into NSXT, it's actually a very easy platform to get set up and running with. Makes a lot. I don't know. I find it easier to understand than NSXV now. In the beginning, I didn't, but now I do. So, and the UI is just light years better. So,
having not messed with V very much at all, really haven't had the time to learn it. Would it be easier for me, not knowing anything about V, to go straight to T?
Yes.
Okay, because you don't have to wrestle that mindset product change, right?
I would say my biggest struggle with learning T was getting myself divorced of V concepts, like stuff in V that doesn't translate into T or is done differently in T. If I was starting straight with T, it would have been a much easier place to start. So
does T have a fully separated GUI? I mean, it's not integrated into vCenter anymore in the
correct
GUI, right?
Yep, because it's multi-hypervisor, right? So the idea is that you could have,
its own standalone
Hyper-V
clients.
So yep.
Do you have anything you can screen share with NSXT, or is that all?
No, I can show
information?
my NSXT environment. It's very basic, so there's not a lot in there, but I can actually
that might make it easier to understand, being basic.
So this is the UI when you come at first. If I hit my dashboard, this is my environment. I've just got a single controller. That's not best practice. Should have 3 or 4, but I have just one.
But it's a lab.
Yeah, it's a lab. So, and transport nodes was a different concept. So these are the 3 different hosts, as well as my router for NSXT. So still overlay network, still quote unquote underlay network. Those concepts carry over. So you can see my overlay and my uplink network. So I have an uplink transport zone that ties into my physical environment, and then the overlay is where all of the NSXT bits live. It's not VXLAN anymore; it's Genevieve, so it's just a different protocol from that perspective. But it's not that hard. You're still deploying an NSX edge. You're still setting up an interface on your physical network, and then having it tie into the overlay network. So it's relatively, I would say it's super easy, but it's relatively easy to get started with.
Is it something that you think they're going to add into the vExpert program so we can have some licensing to play around with it in our labs?
I thought it was already there, but if it's not,
if you have V licenses, you have T licenses.
Oh. That's what it's supposed to be, but I don't know if they've set it up in such a way. I mean, the licensing as a customer is that way. I don't know if it's that way from a vExpert
it shouldn't
program.
Be different. Yet. I don't think it's.
It shouldn't be different. It shouldn't be. I think enterprise. The key hook there is NSX enterprise licensing. If you have enterprise license.
Yeah, that's the big difference. If you buy, like, if you're a customer now and you buy NSX, what they call NSX for the data center, then you're getting just V, I believe. But
so what's really cool about NSXT is one of the cool things is how fast it deploys, like load balancers and such. Like in if you had like on-demand load balancers in VRA, and you went to deploy the load balancer, it would drop a whole new edge in and bolt the load balancer onto that. But it's very quick to deploy load balancers and such inside of NSXT because the router's already there, and really inside of that. Inside of the tier 1 router is essentially a form of containers, right, that are running those routing services. So
interesting. So at this point, if I haven't learned V, I should probably just learn T.
I think it's safe to go that way. There's a lot of features, like, so the feature parity is not 100% there yet. So there's some stuff that's missing, but like basic firewalling's there. I think it's policy manager that's missing in T. So like advanced policy creation, but you can still do, basic DFW content, which obviously I'm not doing very much of at all. So
it's hard to do that in a lab.
most of what I have T4 in place is the virtual networking constructs, like on-demand load balancers, on-demand networks, consumption inside of cloud automation services. So like the network I deploy to is an NSXT network. Looks a little bit different inside of vCenter. It's got a little different icon, but all works the same.
Yeah, this is actually the first time I've ever seen T.
Oh yeah. T is a fun platform. It's very funny. I don't know if you guys know him. A guy named Anthony Burke. He's on the team that globally goes out and deploys NSXT and helping with adoption and such. He's a great friend. So above anybody else, Anthony Burke is the person who can claim victory for Cody wanting to come work at VMware. So above Jed, above Grant, above John, Anthony Burke and a guy named Nick Bradford. I watched a session they did in VMworld San Francisco, and their session just inspired me more than anybody else. So like the story has been consistent my entire time. There's a lot of people who made me think about coming to VMware. There are two people who can claim victory for that, and it's those two. So
Nice.
Cody, have you run across?
He does it.
Sorry, have you run across this add-on called REST NSX?
Yeah. REST NSX is cool.
I got a demo from DJ, and he's basically the owner of the company, for a customer that I'm working with, and I came away watching what that product does, and my brain was just exploded. I mean, yeah, everything that it does.
Way to do multi-tenancy and NSX gloriously.
It's unbelievable, and I'm like every single piece of this product should be in the next release of NSX.
Yeah,
really?
I don't disagree with you. I don't work in the NSBU, so I'm allowed to have that opinion. So.
So I'm just like they gave me some trial bits of it, so I'm rebuilding my lab purposefully so that I can deploy REST NSX on top of my NSX build. And then I want to use, but the big thing that they tout is you could take and migrate a active configuration from V to T with their product.
Very cool.
So I want to play with that, and that's everything that it does. It just makes it super easy, like especially for people who are so not wanting to learn a new networking product. If you're deep into the Cisco world, or if you're deep into Juniper or whatever, and this REST NSX thing, it kind of adds just enough of an extra GUI layer on top of things to make it a little bit easier to manage NSX if you're not wanting to learn a whole new CLI.
Totally. They've done a great job with that product, and I think it's like relatively cheap to get started, like as a customer to buy licensing for it. Like
depends on your definition of cheap.
Rex on Rex. I worked for a utility company. Come on.
Yeah. But no, I've because of my partner, I've seen the pricing. It is not actually not terrible. So I'm gonna have our podcast schedule for next year is almost already fully booked for the year.
Woo, good for you.
But I'm gonna get DJ from REST NSX on an episode, and I have his blessing once I kind of go through my lab and build a presentation. I'm gonna pitch to the V Brown Bag folks to do a V Brown Bag on basically my favorite NSX add-on things and include them in there. So
nice, very cool.
So that's gonna be like I'm gonna try to do it like February, March if I can get in the schedule. I've got to talk to the folks there about that. We'll see if
very cool, man.
So, but yeah, it's been that after VM, because I was really sad because I saw their demo after VMworld, so I didn't get a chance to talk to them while I was there, and. I'm a huge fan of them now, but anywho.
Nice, man.
All right, are we hitting time for you, Cody? Do you have to go?
Yeah, I think it's about time for me to punch out and go be a family man.
All right.
Sounds good.
Cody, any last words of wisdom and advice for people listening today? That's the end of the.
Hopefully, hopefully people will keep the upcoming news about the thing I'm going to do a secret, because I'd like to do some cool announcements around it. But if you don't, that's okay too. I won't be too disappointed. And plus, it'll just show that people are listening to the cast, which is valuable, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Let me just preface it this way: if you're listening to the show right now, this is going to get released either tonight or tomorrow morning. If you are a listener and you want to tweet about the thing Cody talked about, just say, "I'm so excited for Redacted." If you want the information linked to the podcast.
Exactly. So
make sure whatever you tweet is in the quote redacted form, and direct people to us to get the real information.
As far as end of the year stuff goes, remember everyone, this is the time about family, and not just real family, like blood family. Friends count too, right? Remember, this is about being close to people, and it's about the people around you. So don't forget to let the people know who you appreciate, and make sure to build the people up around you. That's what the season's all about.
Very cool. Tony, parting thoughts?
I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. I will play us out, and it's been another great Gigacast episode. Thanks for joining us all today.
Thanks for dropping the Docker knowledge, Cody.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm glad to impart some stuff.
Again, this has been Gigacast episode 23 for November 13th, 2018. Thanks again to Cody D. Arkland. He is at Cody D. Arkland on Twitter. I am at VCIXNV. Tony is at Import Car Guy. We're gonna try to schedule an episode in December, and I've got to talk to Tony about this yet, but I think he'll be okay with it. I would like to do a Gigacast listener appreciation episode where we talk to you folks, some of our listeners. I want to get a handful of people together. This will be sometime in December, so we'll find something that works for a group of people and talk about what's important to you guys, the listeners of this show. So I've got a couple of people in mind, Al, and let's have some fun with this, and it'll be a good holiday episode where we create our own little virtual family on the podcast. So look for more on that. Again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.